Okay. Good morning. Today's daf yomi is Kesubos 68. We're going to start on 67b, around 10 lines from the bottom. We're telling the stories about Mar Ukva and his just tremendous dedication to the mitzvah of tzedakah. Hava Anya b'shivuvusei dehaving ragil shaduri le'arbamei azuzei kol mal yom kippura. There was a poor man in Mar Ukva's neighborhood that he used to have the practice to send him 400 zuz on the eve of Yom Kippur. Yom Echad, one Erev Yom Kippur, Shadrinuni Le Biad Beret, one Erev Yom Kippur, he sent him the money through his son. Also, Amar Lo Tzarach, the son comes back and says, you don't need to send him money. So Mar Ukva says to his son, what did you see to indicate to you that we don't need to send him so much money? He says, Chazai de Kamazafu Yayin Yashan. I saw that he was using old wine as a room air freshener to make the room smell good. So Mar Ukva said, "Mefane koi hai." Oh, if that's the case, if he's such a fine person that he needs wine as air freshener, I finu v'shadrinuni. He says, double the amount of money we're giving him, double it, because you see that this is his needs are greater. When Mar Ukva was about to die, he says, bring me my cheshbon, my calculations, what I gave to charity. It says that he gave 7,000 sianki coins. Amar Zuzdai Kalili Vorcha Rachikta. He said, listen, I've got a long way to go. I don't have enough provisions for the road. I mean, I didn't give enough charity. Come Baz Bezela Palgim Amona. He got up, he gave away half of his money to charity. And Mara asked the question, but how could he have done that? You're not supposed to give more than 20% to charity. We learned some Dav Nun. So Mara says, Hani Mili Mechayim. That's when you're in your lifetime. While you're living, you can't give more than 20%. Shema yer minachasav. Or where are you going to lose your money? But after you die, then there's no issue. After you die, you can give more money to charity. It seems from Mar Ukva that he only gave half to charity, left some for his heirs. Rabbi Abba was wrapping up his money in his handkerchief, and then he would hang it over his back. And then he used to walk in front of the poor people's homes, so where the poor people hung out, and then they would collect the money. And he would just look back, I guess, every now and then to make sure that the people who weren't really poor weren't stealing his money. There was Havahu Anya Davarago Shadure Arbazuzek Kamal Shabasa. Rabbi Chanina had a poor man that he used to send him 400 zuz every Erev Shabbos. Yom Echad, one day, one day he sent it with his wife. Asai Amrale, when she came, she said to him, Lo tzarech. She said, you don't need to send the money. So he says, so Rabbi Chanina said, My chazis. So he said, what'd you see that? You tell me we don't have to send the money. So she says, I heard that she was saying to him, what are we going to dine on tonight? B'talei kesef or b'talei zav? Are we going to dine on the silver tablecloths or the gold tablecloths? So this guy, Rabbi Chanina, very upset, and he was about to criticize him. Before we see his criticism, Tosfos on the top of 68a asked the question, what's the difference between this case and the case of Mar Ukva, where Mar Ukva doubled the money when he heard that their needs were greater? So Tosfos says, this is not a question of a person's, Tosfos used the word pinuk, meaning to say that they're sensitive and they can't handle it otherwise. This was just a question that shows that they have great wealth, that they have gold and silver tablecloths. So anyway, Rav Chanina says, let's go show strength to those who are, let's give gratitude to those who are deceiving us. Because we're not for the people, in fact, that there are people who are deceiving us. We will be sinning every day, as it states, you shall call upon you to God, and there will be sin, and then there will be sin. So meaning to say, if a person calls upon you to Hashem, and so we see somebody doesn't give charity to a poor person who's asking for money, is sinning. But since sometimes people are really being deceptive, this gives us an out and a good excuse. With Tani, meaning to say the reason why we didn't give that person charity was because we thought he was a fraud. Tani Rabbi Chia Barav Midifti, Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Omer, Kol Amalam Einav Minat Tzedakah, whoever averts his eyes from charity, Kilu Oved Avodas Kochavim. If you avert your eyes from charity, it's like you're worshiping idolatry. It says with respect to charity, be careful. It says, this refers to the prohibition of not lending money before the sabbatical year. By the way, that's why there's a practice that even though today nowadays we do the Pruz Bowl, but a lot of people, after we do the Pruz Bowl on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, we'll have a bezdin here in the yeshiva, we'll do a Pruz Bowl. Then people have the practice to lend $5 to somebody else so that they fulfill this mitzvah of lending money before the sabbatical year and basically waiving their loan. So he says, and then it states, that those people who are wicked are now to worship the idolatry. Just like over there, it was talking about the city that went and worshipped idolatry. So to somebody who doesn't give charity is worshiping idolatry. Somebody who makes their eyes look like they're blind. No, you distend your stomach, you make it look like you're malnourished. It makes it look like he can't use his leg. This person was using the fraud. He was making believe he had these ailments. So this person is not going to leave the world until he comes to actually Rahman al-Tzlan having all these ailments. And so too, someone who accepts charity who doesn't need it, in the end, he's going to need charity. That's so here we're talking about the concept we learned in Mishnah and Peah. If a person wants to collect money, Rashi says the first clause of that Mishnah is Mishi Yeshel Masayim Zuz. He's not allowed to take somebody who has 200 zuz. You can't take the money that's reserved for the poor people. But let's say he has a house. He doesn't have the cash. So we don't require him to sell his house and his clothing in order to say that you actually do have the 200 zuz. But we say you can take the money even though you're house poor, as they say. So the Gemara says, is that really the case? Well, we don't require him to sell. That we say, and if a person was using gold, let him use the silver clothing. If he was using gold clothing, let him use silver clothing. And so we see that we make him get rid of his clothing, get the cheaper clothing, so that he doesn't have to take the money from the gleanings from the field. So Amar Zvid, he says the first answer is Zvid. He says, well, it's not difficult. It depends what type of garments or utensils you want to sell and force him to sell. It depends if he has gold, if he has, it says depends if he has a table and a bed or a cup and a plate. We don't make him sell his cup and his plates. So we ask why not? He says it's because he says I can't use a gold and silver. I can't use a cup that's not gold or silver. It's disgusting to me. First says, well, don't make. But then also he could say the same thing. I need this fancy bed, or else my back hurts. I won't be able to sleep properly. I need a good table to feel like a mensch. So Amar. So Mita Shulchanami Amar Lo Mekabel Ilav. He says that I can't function without such a bed and table. So Amar Ava Brei Derava Machrisha de Kaspa. No, we're talking about a case where he has a silver comb. He's got a fancy comb, and you can't say that he needs this special comb in order to comb his hair. So you can make him sell the special comb. Rav Papa gives a different answer. Rav Papa says, "Lo kasha kan kodem she'avo lidei givoy kan achar she'avo lidei givoy." So one is before he collected and one is after he collected. Meaning to say that, which we said that we don't force him to sell his house in order to say, look, you have 200 zuz. That's when that's if he came and collected the money. He didn't. It collected the gleanings. He didn't have any money. He just had a house. So under those circumstances, we'll say you're not obligated to sell. But that which we say where we force you to sell your home, that's where you collected the money already. He had enough. He collected the gleanings from the field. He had enough money, and he wasn't supposed to collect it. And now we come back to him and we say, you shouldn't have collected that money. He said, well, what do I do now? I already spent my money. We said, but you have a house. And then we force him to sell his house to pay back the gleanings that he took. Because he had the money when he took the gleanings. So now it says the Mishnah in the middle of 68a, Yisoma, Shehisiya Ima O Achaha Midai. Now let's say there's an orphan girl whose mother or brother married her off. And they wrote her a very, very small dowry. They wrote her either 50, 100 or 50 zuz. When she gets older, she can say, she can go back to him and say, listen, you really, when my father died, he was supposed to leave me more money. He left more money, and you should have given me a greater dowry. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Imheisias Abbas Harishona. Rabbi Yehuda says, if he married off the first girl, he should give to the second girl just like he gave to the first girl. Excuse me. Now, sometimes he was rich and then he became poor, or he was poor and then he became rich. So, no. So we can't evaluate based upon what he gave the first time, what he would give the second time. What we have to just do is do an objective evaluation of how much money is in the estate. And that's how we know how to take a percentage of that and give that to the ksuba. So Amar Shmuel, with Farnasa, for a dowry, Shaman Ba'av. Shmuel says, for a dowry, to give the dowry to the girl, we give her a dowry based upon what we call an umdina. We say we look at the father's spending habits and what he gave in his life, and we can determine based upon our calculations what he most likely would have given to this girl as a dowry. Umar says, is that really the case? But we have a brayz which says that the daughters are supported. Nizonos, they're supported from the estate. Misparnasos, usually misparnasos means they get a dowry from the assets of their father. Ketzad, how do we do this according to this braysa? Ein omrim ilo avia kayam kach v'kach. We don't say, well, if the father was alive, this is what he would give to her. We don't say that. We don't do this umdina like Shmuel is saying. We just evaluate the assets, and we give her on the basis of the subjective analysis. It seems to be exactly contradicting Shmuel. So Gemara says, "My parnassus about." Aren't we talking here about the dowry for the husband? It's like, no, that's talking about the parnassus atzman. That's talking about when it says parnasa, it means giving her support. The Gemara says, "Hani zonos u'parnasos katani," but the word zonos means it's the support we're giving her. The Gemara says, "My lab achas parnassus abal achas parnassus atzma." There isn't one referring to the dowry of the husband, the other referring to the money that she gets for her support until she gets married. No, it says Gemara, idi parnassus atzma. Both of them referring to her own support. It refers to two different types of support. One is food and drink, one is clothing. Gemara asks another question on Shmuel. From our Mishnah, sometimes the father was poor and then became rich and then became poor. We can't give an evaluation. we do an objective analysis. My ani v'ashir. Now, what does it mean when he was sometimes poor and then he became wealthy? Ani b'nechasim, asher b'nechasim. If you want to say he was poor in assets and wealthy in assets, we call the Tanakama. This would indicate that the Tanakama is in a position. I feel asher ve'ani, that even if he was wealthy and poor, we give to her like he gave initially, meaning not like Shmuel. But how could that be? But he doesn't have any money left. So it must be Olav Ani Bitas and Asher Bitas. It means whether he's cheap or whether he's poor. Vikatani Shamanas and Achasim and Nosalam. We see we do an objective analysis. So it's not like Shmuel said that we do an umdina, we do this calculation to see what he likely would have given. No, we see we do an objective analysis and of his assets, and then we determine based upon the objective analysis how much we give. You'll see, we see it was 10% that they gave us a dowry. So we see that Shmuel's contradicting the rabbis because Shmuel says we do an umdina, subjective analysis of what we think the father would have given, and here the rabbis are saying we do an objective. To the Shmuel, it's a refutation of Shmuel because we don't follow this concept called umdana, evaluating what we think the father would have given. Gemara says, well, Shmuel must rule like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said, and we base it on what he gave the first daughter. Gemara says, well, if Shmuel's ruling like Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda said, whatever the first daughter gave, whatever he gave to the first daughter, we give to the second daughter. Well, if that's the case, Shmuel should have just said, instead of Shmuel saying, Parnasa Shaman Ba'ab, he should have just said, V'neima like Rabbi Yehuda. Shmuel should have just said the laws like Rabbi Yehuda. And the said, no, Yamar like Rabbi Yehuda. If Shmuel had said those words, the laws like Rabbi Yehuda, Amina Dafke Isiya, that's only if he specifically married her. Why? If he specifically married off the first daughter, because there it's really obvious what he would have given to the first daughter, and therefore we can determine what he would have given to the second daughter. But if he didn't marry off anybody, maybe we would say, well, that you can't evaluate what he would give. Kamash Shmuel. So Shmuel is teaching us time of Rabbi Yehuda, the Azlina Basar Umdana. What's the reason for Rabbi Yehuda? It's not only because he married off the first daughter, but it's because in general we follow this concept called Umdana, that we evaluate. It doesn't matter if he actually married off one daughter already or not. The only reason why the Mishnah, when Mishnah discusses Rabbi Yehuda's position, it says we married off the first daughter, is to show us the extreme position of the Rabbanan. The Afagav, the Hisiya, the Gali Daita, even though he married off the first girl, and he therefore demonstrated his intent. The sages say we still don't follow this concept called umdina. So Rava said to Rav Chisda, he said they've been teaching in your name that the law is like Rabbi Yehuda, who says we say umdina. So Rav Chisda was happy. He said Rav Chisda was happy that they were teaching this. He said, I wish they would continue to teach such things in my name. Marler says, does Rava really say that the law is like Rabbi Yehuda? Matanya Rabbi Omer, Basan is onus mena'achen, but tell us Isor nechasim. If there's a girl who's getting supported by the estate, she takes 10% of the assets for her ksuba. And we see that the law is like Revi, which means that we don't do umdina, but we follow the position of an objective amount, 10% of the estate for the ksuba. So Gemara says, Lokasha hada mina hada lo amina. He says, yeah, when we're able to do this umdina, then we're going to do it. But if we can't do this umdina, then we just take 10% as an objective amount. This is logical. So this is logical to say that this is the answer because one time there's a different source which says Rebbe gave 1/12 as a dowry. So Koshinah. So one time Rebbe gave a 10th and the other time he gave a 12th. So the difference is whether or not we were able to do an umdina. If we can do an umdina, we do it. If not, we give 10%. So we see that Rabbi gives 10%. Rabbi says if we can't do an umdana, we give 10% as a dowry. So Amar lo Rabbi Varecha, according to you, Mishi Yeshlo Eser. So let's say you have 10. Let's say you have $1 million in the estate. You have 10 girls. Uven and he has no uven, and he has a son. So each girl is going to take $100,000. Now the son doesn't inherit anything. That's no fair. So this is what Rebbe said. This is what I'm saying. Rishon and Otelis Isur Nechas. So the first one takes 10%, which is 100,000. But now there's 900,000 left. So Shniya b'Mashe Shir. The second one takes 90,000, and then the third one is going to take 10% of what's left. What's left is 100. So what's left is the first one. So the second one comes along is 900,000. Then you subtract 90,000. So 800,000. So the third one is going to take 10% of 810,000, and so on. And then once they've all taken them, then you pool that pot of all the 10 girls, and then they divide that equally amongst themselves. That's what Rabbi is saying. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, the Gemara says that doesn't make sense. The Gemara says, why do you say that after the first one is taking her assets, then she has taken her 10%, then she has to go back later on and divide up all again with everybody else? The first one already got her 10%. Why does she have to go back and divide up with her sisters equally? So the Gemara says, no, this is what we mean. In if all the 10 girls are getting married at once, then they each take equally. They take 10% if as though each one of them had divided up the estate like this, and then they pool the money and divide up equally. Now this is support for Amasa. He says in if they all come to divide up like once, they're all getting married at the same time. They take 10%. 10%, and now it means they take the 10% as one, meaning to say that they do this method. One person takes 10%, the next one 10% of what's left, and then they pool it together. Tana Rabban and the rabbis taught in a brayso, habanos, these girls, bein bagru, let's say they became an adult before they got married. Let's say they got married and only then became an adult. And once they become an adult, they lose their support. Their brothers no longer need support them from the estate. But they still are entitled to a ksuba. That's the position of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Divrei Rebbe. That's the position of Rebbe, where Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, "Af ivdu parnasasan." And once they become an adult, they lose their dowry. They no longer have a right to get a dowry. So he gives them a good eitzah. He says, so what should they do? Better sure, make sure that they get married prior to this. Either they hire people to become their husbands. They say, well, you be my husband. They pay them. And that way they're able to collect the dowry. And then who knows if they stay together or not, but that's what they do. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Yehuna, Hilchos Rebbe, he says the law is light. So Rav Nachman said in the name of Huna, he says Hilchos Rebbe. What did Rebbe say? Rebbe said that the girls, whether or not they became an adult before they got married, or whether they got married before they became an adult, they don't lose their ksuba. So Eitzva Rav Nachman, but Rav says to Rav Nachman, Yisoma Sheis, he challenges Rav Nachman. How can you say the law is like Rebbe that the girls don't lose their dowry? Because don't we say Yisoma Sheisiasa Ima Achia Midai? So let's say there's an orphan girl who's this is from our Mishnah, and they married off, her mother or brother married her off with her consent, because and they gave her a dowry only of 100 or 50 zuz. Then when she's an adult, she's able to go back to them and say, I was entitled to more of a ksuba. And so now here's the question. How could Rabbi say that if she's an adult, she loses her she does not lose her dowry. Time adiktana. What's the reason why she could go back and claim it? Because she was still a minor in this case. Hagadola, but if she would have been adult, Vitra, she would have waived her rights to her ksuba. So Gemara says, Lokasha, that's not a difficulty. No, what we're talking about is that which Rabbi said she doesn't lose her ksuba, and Rav Huna says the law is like him. That's where she was objecting, and she says, "I want my 10%." But when our Mishnah says that this case only refers to a minor, but an adult has lost her ksuba, that's where she became an adult and she didn't object. She didn't voice an objection. This is indeed logical. Otherwise, you have a contradiction within Rebbe. Because we have a different source where Rebbe says, Rebbe Omer Basan is nizones min achen, a girl who's supported by the brothers, notos isur nechasim. A girl who's supported by her brothers, she gets her dowry. Does this mean nizones in she'ein in nizones lo? Does it mean only if she's supported by the brothers does she get a dowry? It doesn't make sense. So it must be that must be that which Rabbi said that she does not lose her dowry. That's where she objected before she became an adult, and she says, "I don't want to lose my dowry." And that which Rabbi says that only a girl who's supported gets the dowry, but the Bulgara she does not. That's where she didn't object before she became an adult. So Amalei Ravina. Rav Amar Rav Adabar Mishimcha, he said to Rav Adabar in your name. So Ravina said to Rav that Rav Adabar said in your name, Bagra ina limkos, that even when she becomes an adult, she doesn't need to object. Nises ina limkos, that if she is becoming an adult or if she's getting married before she is an adult, she doesn't need to object and say, I am not giving up my ksuba. The only time she needs to object is bagra v'nises. And if she became an adult and then she get married, and they're giving her a dowry of less than 10%, then she does need to object. And if she doesn't object, she lost her ksuba. So it's not one or the other. It's only in both cases that she needs to object. Mar says, does Rava really say this? That a nara, that a pre-Bulgaris, a pre-adult girl gets married, does not need to object. But one time, Rava challenged Rav Nachman. He says, Yisoma, from the case of the orphan girl, that means to say that she's the one who gets to get her back. But and Rav Nachman responded to Rava that she doesn't lose her ksuba. That's where she objected. But if she didn't object, she would lose it. And where it says Lakasha, it depends whether or not she is being supported by her brothers. Meaning to say, that which Rava says, that a nara that doesn't object does not lose her dowry, that's where she's continuing to be supported by the brothers. And therefore we say that the reason why she was quiet is because she was embarrassed, is because she's still being supported from them. But that which Rava said, that he agrees with the Mishnah that a nara that doesn't object loses her ksuba, that's where she was not being supported by the brothers. Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rabbi, Parnasa ena ketanai ksuba. This dowry, this parnasa, the dowry that the girl gets, that is not part of the stipulation of the ksuba. What does it mean? It's not part of the stipulation of the ksuba. Now the ksuba says you're going to stay in my that my daughters will be supported by the estate, but and they will have a dowry. So what does this mean that when we say that the parnasa is not part of the stipulation of the ksuba? That maybe the dowry you could take even from properties that were sold, but you had a lien on them, whereas the support of the daughters you can take from such properties. It's only from the free and clear properties. Well, if that's the case, then properties that you still have. That's an obvious thing. We know this every day, that you could take money for the dowry from properties that you that even though there is a lien on the properties, or the properties were sold, but you can't do it for mazonos. So maybe the distinction is that the dowry you can also collect from movable objects, Utanai ksuba mikarkai gavi. Whereas the support, which is a stipulation of the ksuba, the support for the daughters, that you can only collect from the real estate. But mimetatli lo gavia. So, but from movable objects you can't collect it. And with Rebbe, idi migva gavia. But according to Rebbe, you could collect both from the movable objects. The tanya, meaning the support, the mazonos, and the dowry, you could collect from the movable objects. How do we know this? The tanya echad nechasim sheish lo nechrayas, echad nechasim she'en lo nechrayas, motziin lo mazon isha u'banos. Because we learned in the Brisa whether it's assets sheyesh lahen achrayos, that there are, i.e., real estate, or whether it is assets that there is no, that they are not real estate, you can use it for support of the girl, of the widow and her daughters. That's the position of Rebbe. On my parnasa, well, if that's the case, what does Rebbe mean when he says that parnasa is not like the Tanai Ksuba? The Tanya, like we learned in the Brisa, Omer ayazunu benosav minachasav ein shomer. If the person said, don't support my daughters from my estate, we don't listen to him. But if he says, ayis parasu benosav minachasav shomer. If he says, I don't want my daughter getting a dowry from my estate, we listen to him. Because the dowry is not part of the stipulation of the ksuba. We're going to stop here. If anybody has any questions.